Welcome to A Separate Piece, the classic American novel. This is a book review. If you want the summary, go to the other videos. Let's get started with. Now, of course, we actually have to talk a lot about this book itself. A Separate Piece itself is a book that I would argue is very much worth reading. Of course, this Separate Piece isn't that great of a book if you consider about its content. It's only this short, but then again, if you compare it to Don Quixote, of course, it's kind of terrible. But if you look at it across modern times of history and of books, of course, then you pretty much find out that it's the perfect book for you, and it's the greatest book of all time. It is a classic American novel that you can go ahead and read about without actually go ahead and embarrassing yourself in some places too, like romance fiction, unfortunately, in my community. Next thing that happens is that this book itself is mainly about how war goes ahead and takes away people's innocences, and also goes ahead and shatters their brains and probably breaks their mind. The army is not a place for soft people like some people, but unfortunately there are a lot of soft people in this world too. Unfortunately, I'm being one of them. And with this, they kind of have to harden them too. You have to put them on fire. You have to go ahead and cool them so that the wet little clay liquid turns into a hard-baked clay. Unfortunately, that clay is also pretty easily to be shattered, so if you try to, unless you go ahead and torch it up a bit more to make it even more harder, if you grab a hammer and try to smash it, you'll probably easily smash in the first hit. Next thing that happens is next thing I really want to talk about is that this book itself is a must-read especially if you're an American. It's a great coming-of-age story because it's like they're 16 years old. These boys, they're turning 17, and then they're planning on what they're going to do in 18 when they can enroll in the army. Of course, they don't plan on going to college, except maybe Gene, but he wants to be like Finney because that's his best friend and best mate. With that, you can go ahead and figure out all this innocence and all these daredevil things. Finney himself is a daredevil who likes athleticism, and Gene himself hates daredevil's things. He hates these kinds of things. He doesn't want to do daredevils himself, and he's really good at academics. So they're pretty opposite people, but however, they somehow became friends. Now, why should you read this book? Is probably the first question that should pop into your mind. This novel is like it makes such a deep impression in people too. It made a deep impression in me, and it goes ahead and conjures up atmospheres in other people too. If you actually read it, I mean, if you read it 50 years ago, if you're one of those people who read it 15 years ago and you're still alive right now, well, just give me your ideas. Also, I highly doubt you guys watch YouTube videos. There are a lot of things about the Separate Piece that makes it a really great novel, a really something worthy of the classic American novel title. With this, one of them being the fact that World War II's been happening on that time, as well as the fact that it's talking about adolescence. It's a great coming-of-age novel. It also teaches you about things too. It teaches you about friendship and how some things are just too fragile. It shows you how fragile people are and why they are so fragile too. There's a lot of people who still don't understand this in the world, but I think that the best way to read this book is to go ahead and with an open mind. If you're 16 years old, and perfect, but the only thing that makes it not perfect is that it's not the 1950s anymore. But the great thing is, it doesn't matter. It's still relevant in our lives. Sure, there's not a world war going on right now, but maybe a Cold War might happen, but not a world war. Everything seems to be going on with life right now. There's daredevils still in this world, sure, and there's still life in this world too. However, innocence is still a thing in this world, and most of us are still wet clays when we're born, and then some of us get hardened, super hardened, through fires, while the others somehow avoid it by adding water to themselves too. Problem is, no matter what, you're still going to be fragile too. The water's fragile, especially clay, because it can be divided easily. However, the hardened clay, it's very hard to put it back together once you smash it with a hammer. But soft people themselves, if you caress them long enough, and if you have the right people, you can always put them back in their right shape. They go with the flow. But the hard people, once they're broken, well, they're broken forever, mate. You can't change that unless you have a super glue gun. And that's a separate piece. It's a great analogy book. It's a great coming-of-age book. And my take on this is that it can go ahead and teach you about the world itself. It doesn't harden you, but it gives you a little warmth. It puts you in the sun, but it doesn't put you in there long. It only took me like 2 hours to read this. And with that, you can go ahead and once you pick up this book, open it and start reading it, you'll know and you will never regret it, especially if you're an American. Unfortunately, I'm not an American, but it still has a great impression on me. And with that, that is the end of this book. So I'm really end of this review. So I really hope you guys actually did enjoy this episode. I hope to see you guys in the next one. And so until then, shout out, peace, bye bye.